questions. You were all so excited with Anand's talk. We've gone a bit into the 5 minutes that were reserved for the break, but I think we have the energy to go on. And welcome, Salome. Salome, thank you so much for being with us today. You are a global citizen of the world, if I may say. You're multicultural. You have been a leader yourself. You led your first team when you were 19, if that's correct. Furthermore, you have leadership experience from all over the world. You're a board member, you're a public speaker, and now you're a leadership and life coach based in Copenhagen. Your specialties are within change management and how do you have hybrid workplaces, but also how does a leader show up in an authentic way and have values. So welcome, and the screen is all yours.
Thank you so much, Sadia, for the introduction. I am going to share my screen with you as well, and you can let me know if you can indeed see it. A little, yes, you can. Perfect. Okay, well, it is a pleasure to be here with all of you today. And thank you, Anand, as well, for a really great presentation and a great kickoff to the event that we have today with everybody. I can only assume that you are all here today because you want to learn and because you want to be inspired, and hopefully the presentation and the talk today will give you that as well. We heard it a little bit in the introduction at the beginning of the day, but in this very moment, we're really going through a shift when it comes to leadership. And with everything that we've gone through on a global level these past 2 years, there is really no better time to talk about the role of leadership in times of change and in times of uncertainty, and especially the role of authentic leadership, which in the light of the pandemic has really been brought forward as a style of leadership that is quite helpful and actually kind of key to kind of managing crises. And as you'll see throughout the presentation today, it's useful for really any kind of change that we go through as human beings and as leaders and as organizations. So there will be some parts where you will be, taking a little bit of an active role during this session. So on one hand, I will be inviting for some reflection. So if you're old-fashioned like me, you have, a notebook next to you and a pen that you can write down things in. And I will really want everybody, as much as possible, obviously, to also use the chat function throughout the session. So I'll be asking a few questions here and there, and I'd love to get your input as we move on. So a little bit about what you will be hearing today. So I'll introduce myself very shortly because I did get a really nice introduction. I will go through what I like to call the storm of change and uncertainty, and how to lead through the storm through something called the journey of the you. And we will talk about authentic leadership and also the paradox of authenticity. And we will end with Dare to Lead, which is really about taking action. So you will leave today with something in one way or another that you can take with you, which will obviously, in the best coaching style, be something that will come also from yourself. And then at the end, there will be a Q&A. And as we go along the session, if you do want to ask your questions, some of the organizers can gather them, or you can just write them on your notebook and then ask them at the end. Whatever kind of feels best, but we'll have probably around 5 minutes for that at the end. So just shortly about me, just to give you a little bit about my background as well. So I am Danish, but I'm also French Moroccan, and I'm based in Copenhagen. And one of the reasons I became a leadership and life coach is because I am very passionate about personal development, about really figuring out ways that we as human beings can live up to our true potential, but also very much about leadership because it's something that I was fortunate and privileged enough to be able to do from a very early age. And through the years of leading myself, but also being a part of teams where I had leaders and bosses, I've learned a lot and I've been very curious, and I'm very passionate about making leaders even better and making them more self-aware so that they can lead and have even more positive impact in the world. So I use my different experiences to do that. But let's start with kind of settling into the topic a little bit. You have in front of you an image. And what I'll ask you to do now is to use the chat and tell me what emotions this image invokes in you. The first thing that comes to your mind, just write it down, let me know. You don't have to think too much about it. It's really about just what pops into your mind as you're kind of seeing this image. What emotion is coming out? Okay, we have storm, dark, overwhelmingness, tumultuous, unavoidable, rough, excitement as well. VUCA, I don't know what VUCA means, but I love the word. Upside down. Yeah, thank you. So there's a lot of really powerful words here coming from this image in particular. Somebody is also saying excitement and fear, resilience. Beautiful, beautiful. Now let me show you this next image and tell me, when you look at this image right here, what emotions does this image invoke in you in contrast to the other one? Optimism, hope, happy. I can see you're writing all of that. Beginning, grateful, bright, strength, enlightenment, loving all of your words, energy, possibility. Yeah, amazing. After a long stormy night, positivism. Great, great. Thank you so much for sharing all of those words. So I showed you both of these images because in many ways they are in contrast to one another, but they also really follow one another. Because as you know, in nature, whenever there's been a storm, it always ends with the sun coming back out. And it's really a representation of life. And most importantly, it's really a representation of the cycle of change. And that's really regardless of whether you're going through change as a human being or whether you're going through change in your role or in your organization. So every change that we go through, normally as human beings, we go through a process, a normal human reaction, which is often very unconscious. And it's often a very repeating cycle. And it can be represented by the curve that you see. And at the top left of that curve, before the storm, is what I like to call the status quo, where everything is as we expect, where everything is as we're used to. And then it changes because the storm comes, represented by some kind of change, something that is unprecedented, something that is new, that wasn't expected. And often what happens unconsciously is that we learn in one way or another to adapt and to go through this phase, which is represented by the bottom here, of kind of looking ahead at what's happening. But we often do this very unconsciously, working towards the sun coming back out of the clouds, which is very much working towards resolution, working towards solutions, decision-making, and working towards better results. So I will share also a story about myself. I've been through a big storm that really impacted the way I look at myself, but also leadership, and taught me some really important lessons about leadership and personal growth. And as I tell my story, I will share with you this background screen, this little, you can call it some kind of a drawing of sorts, but it's very much related to that same cycle that you saw before. So to share my story with you, a few years ago, I was in the midst of a storm myself. I was in one of my previous roles, leadership roles. I had an amazing team, and I had built that team from scratch, and I was really happy. And that was my status quo. So at the bottom, or at the, sorry, not at the bottom, at the top left corner, that's where I was, the status quo. And I was very comfortable. I was kind of like a butterfly in a cocoon, you know, that doesn't realize that at some point you're going to be like catapulted out of that cocoon. So one day I was sitting down with my bosses at the time, and they told me that we were going to go through a really big organizational shift and that the changes were going to take effect immediately. And everyone basically was going to be reassigned into different teams. And so they told me, Salome, everyone in your team is going to be moved into different teams. And we need you to do this now with this new responsibility. And I was, to be completely honest, in a state of shock. I felt like I had no control. I felt like I was, you know, completely excluded from decision-making process. And in that meeting, I just kind of shook my head and accepted whatever was going on, just kept myself above water just for the time being in order to get out of that meeting. And leaving that meeting, I realized, oh my God, I'm going to lose my team. And that was really the top of the curve for me, where it says refusal. That's where I was. I was very attached to my status quo. I was very attached to my team. I was very attached to the responsibility that they were my team. I was responsible for them and their well-being and for us getting the job done. So I wasn't ready for this change. And I was very attached, especially to my identity as that leader, attached to being the team manager to this particular team. And what I learned is that it often happens that whenever we're faced with something that is very new to us, or a challenge that we don't necessarily understand or that we're not ready for, we can go through different emotional reactions. So we can feel that we get stuck, or we can feel overwhelmed, or we can feel, you know, unsure of the right course of action, or we can get stuck in an identity that we believe is ours, stuck in this belief of who we are authentically. So I didn't take much time to let it sink in. I just kind of did, in quotation marks, the right thing. And I informed my team. I managed to, you know, prepare the shift with them. I put myself out of the equation completely, and I just went on autopilot. So how that story is going to end, I will tell you in a minute. But in the meantime, I want to show you this. So the curve that you saw before and that I was showing is actually by someone called Otto Scharmer. So it's a theory, and it's called the journey of the you. And in essence, it's really about shifting from a personal, individual-centered approach to a more collective, group-centered one in order to move towards a more sustainable way of acting and of being. So it really proposes that the way that we create, that the quality of our results in any social system that we have in any organization is really a function of the quality of awareness, attention, and consciousness that we operate from. And funny enough, Anand was also talking about consciousness earlier. So going back to my story, I completely skipped some parts. I didn't go through, as you can see at the bottom of the cycle, I didn't go through the process of letting go, presencing, letting come. I didn't go through that. I was holding on to a lot of anger, a lot of disappointment, a lot of sadness. I did act, I did do that, but I didn't do it in an embodied way. So there was something very unresolved inside of me. I was very disconnected. I wasn't authentic. So my story is really a story of imperfection. It is a story about moving kind of backwards and forwards in this kind of natural cycle sometimes. It took me months to really, take the necessary steps to process what was going on, to get in touch with myself in order to really communicate and be honest in a very intentional and professional way with everybody around me, with my team, with my bosses, with everybody in the organization, so that I felt that I was actually congruent with my values and so that I can finally act in an embodied way, which in turn would create deeper connection and deeper trust. So really the morale of the story is that change is a given. And as leaders, what we need to do is really to help others and ourselves navigate through that. So today, because of my experience, I would have acted very differently. It's been years, I know more, I've learned, I've experienced, I'm more conscious, I'm much more aware. But I also acknowledge that this experience enabled me to adopt a learning mindset versus a knower's mindset. It was really an opportunity for me to rise even higher and to meet that version of myself I hadn't met yet, which is often a version you will meet when you go through challenges, only when you go through challenges. Because when we don't let ourselves go through them, we don't let ourselves meet that better version of us, we actually limit our leadership abilities. So this is actually where the concept and authentic leadership is not only helpful, but it's really supportive in learning how to lead through change. Because it's all about presence, it's all about co-creation, it's all about moving away from ego, moving towards an ecosystem of collectiveness and of awareness. The question is, though, what is authentic leadership really? And here, I just want to take a pause, because you've heard a lot. There's a lot of information, a lot of storytelling here. If you had to describe in one word what an authentic leader is to you, what would that be? And please, again, feel free to use the chat to share in one word, what is an authentic leader to you? And this can be based on your experience, your knowledge, you know, whatever it is that you've gone through so far, something you've read maybe, but really one word of what it is that it's like to you, like what really stands out to you. And I'll give you a second here to just kind of say a little bit about what that is as I take a sip of water. Lead by example, humbleness, empathetic. Leading by example, I also remember hearing this from at the beginning when everybody had to put in their thoughts on what leadership was. Being a mentor, vulnerable, yeah, transparent, integrity, honest. So many great qualities. Somebody that keeps guiding, that's trustworthy, adaptive, a servant. Amazing. I mean, really, really amazing qualities that you're all sharing here. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. Realistic, visionary, influencer, yeah. Thank you. Makes them aware of their strengths and weaknesses. Great, Ria, thank you. So what are authentic leaders? In many ways, they are exactly what you've been describing. Exactly your intuition of what an authentic leader is. Because an authentic leader is someone that is true to themselves and their core values. So they are congruent in everything that they do. And it's people that demonstrate integrity. So they say what they mean and they mean what they say. And they adopt a learning mindset. They're not stuck in a belief that they know everything. They are always on a journey of learning. They're self-aware, which means that they question themselves a lot. They realize how they can utilize their strengths to their best capability, but they also are very open to feedback, and they're very aware and question what are their limitations, what are their biases, so that they can keep learning and growing. They're very present and engaged, so they open up for conversation. They don't, they're very proactive and not reactive. They're empathetic, like you said as well. So really able to put themselves in the shoes of others. And they're courageous, which means that, they are able to make decisions and act even when it's really difficult. And that's what happens when you're going through change and difficulty, is that you need to be able to make decisions. And they have a deep sense of responsibility, both for themselves, their teams, their organizations, and often for society as a whole. And then they're emotionally intelligent. So they know how to be vulnerable and be vulnerable in the right way. When it's the right time, they care about well-being of themselves and of everyone. And so all these traits, and I'm mentioning that because they're especially important when we go through change and when we go through challenges. Often what happens is that we steer away from what is actually the most important because we get so caught up in the challenge, in the fear, in all of those reasons and all of those immediate responses that we might have when something different is happening. And so we need to steer back to the core and to what's really important, because, and it's also, we see now as the shift happening within leadership, becoming more aware of these qualities and this way of actually leading. But the way that we think about authenticity is crucial, because it can be empowering and it can be limiting. So in times of change, it's really important that as a leader, as an authentic leader, you realize that one, you're not alone. And two, you are in constant change as well as human being. And it's only when we realize that we can really liberate ourselves from the image that we create of the person and leader we think we need to be, and give space for the leader that we can grow into. So getting out of the authenticity paradox is really about thinking in a new way about yourself, in a new way about your role, in a new way about your leadership. Because we're so accustomed to being what others expect us to be, to live up to this higher standard that we put ourselves up against. And we're crumbling under the pressure that we have put on ourselves to always be perfect. And that needs to stop. You are the person that you were yesterday that knew less than you know today. And you're also the person that you're going to be tomorrow. And you're also the person that you are today. And that's all a part of the journey, regardless of how much knowledge you have and the experience that you're going through. So it's really important that you ask yourself, when am I feeling like my most authentic self? When am I living according to my values? When am I not? When am I acting differently? When am I stuck in an old belief of who I am? When am I not growing? When am I not learning? Because it's important that as you go through change, you have yourself with you along the journey. Because as you know, leadership is about leading others. And so you need to be able to lead yourself as well in that process. Otherwise, you're going to be lost and everyone else around you is going to be lost. You have to think of it this way. When you're going through something, can you look at yourself in the mirror with all the actions that you're taking? Because if you can't, then it's going to be difficult for others to, trust everything that you're doing. So I just want to share one story here, a little bit shorter than the one I was telling before, because around 1 year ago, I started working with a client that was really struggling under the pandemic in their organization because they were going through layoffs and they were going through having to work remotely, like basically what very much almost everyone in the world was really going through. And this leader was really going through complete burnout. She had lost confidence in who she was as a person because she used to be the leader, according to herself, that knew everything, that was a great leader, that was able to manage whenever a small challenge was occurring. And she was just seen as someone that had all the answers, that was able to guide people whenever they needed it. And so all of a sudden, she was in a new situation where she felt completely stuck and she almost considered quitting. She couldn't recognize herself. She felt like she was completely inauthentic. She was pretending like she had everything under control. And she didn't. And it was only until she was able to see her own situation from a different perspective that she was able to make a change. So one, she was able to accept the change that was actually going on. And she was able to accept that it was okay to let go of being that leader who had all the answers and becoming the leader that arose from this challenge. We often talk about the phoenix that rises from the ashes. And this was really the situation here. So she gave herself permission to become a different version of who she was, to become almost a better version of who she was because of everything she didn't know, because of all the hardships she was going through in her job, in her organization, and everything else. So she needed to be willing to meet that person. She needed to be able to be willing to show up as the best person that she could be in that moment. So really, in essence, when it comes to leadership, it's really about being able to have courage over comfort, over being stuck in the past. It's about daring to lead. And like we talked about, as one of the crucial things when it comes to authentic leadership, awareness is one of them. Awareness of your situation, awareness of yourself, awareness, collective awareness as well. And the best place to start with that is starting with self-awareness. So being able to look at yourself in a different light and adopt this learning mindset. And by doing that, you take the first steps on a really beautiful journey where you can actually create even more positive impact around you. So what I invite you to do now is to look at these archetypes, kind of like a chart. Because when it comes to self-awareness, there are different levels of it. There's internal self-awareness and there's external self-awareness. And many of us have absolutely no idea about the differences. And this is really an invitation for yourself. It's just a personal invitation that you can take with you, personal self-reflection, because nobody is expecting anybody to be sharing anything in the chat or anything else. It's personal, which means this is also the ultimate time for you to be super honest, because it's just you. So when you look at this chart and you look at the different things that it says, ask yourself, where am I? Do I challenge my own views? Do I have blind spots? Am I pleasing others mostly? Am I very aware of what matters to me? Am I where I want to be? Do I value other people's opinions? Where are you actually? Because it's only when you truly acknowledge where you are that you can begin to say, wow, I have so much to learn still. This is amazing. And it's really about being honest, right? With yourself first. And by doing that, you become so much more knowledgeable about yourself. And you become so much more knowledgeable that you can take that with you as you lead others through processes of change also within themselves. So you gain a lot of wisdom through that. Obviously, you'll be able to take the slides with you. I'm sure they will be sent to you. So now, because I always said at the end of the presentation, it was going to be very much focused around daring to lead, so taking action, giving you some self-reflection. But the last one that I want to give you as well is this one. And again, it's for you. So what is one thing just for yourself that you really want to commit to today for yourself and your leadership going forward? You can write this down in your textbook, in your notebook, or wherever it is that you like to do it. Often we get results when we actually commit to something. And it's something that I do as well in my coaching. I never leave a client hanging. They always have to have a specific action that they leave with. And so this is what I want to do with you, but it will just be for yourself. So whatever it is that has inspired you or challenged you or made you think of something differently today, what can you take with you? So this was the end of the presentation. And now I want to invite everyone to kind of ask whatever questions that you may have. And I also invite you to take the conversation further. I'm always loving to talk to new people, to hear different perspectives, to be challenged myself. So you're very welcome to connect with me. You can check out my website, but you can also just connect with me on LinkedIn or on Instagram. And I am very curious to hear now the questions that you might have that I can hopefully, maybe not, but hopefully answer.
And just to let you know about time, we have only 3 minutes left. So it's not going to be that very long Q&A session, but we have room for 3 questions. So
Yeah, and otherwise you can always send me a question on LinkedIn and then we'll see.
Thank you. Thank you, Salome. That's great that we have that option.
Yeah.
Any questions?
And if you don't have any questions, you can also, if you want, write in the chat box one thing that you're leaving with. That is also something that you can share if you feel comfortable doing that.
Well, this has definitely been inspiring, Salome. Lead yourself first and then lead others. And that's something that we do have the tendency to forget in our busy lives. And the thing you mentioned about being self-aware of who you want to be, who do you want to show up as, there's actually a growing number of research that supports that line of thought, because change is much easier to implement if you think of yourself as a transformation project and that you're going through an identity shift. So if you want to have the identity of a healthy, fitter person in a year's time, then it's much easier for our brains to process that and then move towards actions that will lead you to your goal.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Usha, you've written, "How will I know who I am?"
Oh, such a great philosophical question.
And we only have 1 minute left for that. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, this is good. You know, Usha, one of the things that I really think is the foundation for everyone is to get in touch with our values. And I know that sometimes that sounds like, oh, values. But you know what? It's actually really, really important. And if you want, you can contact me. I have an amazing, and anyone that wants it, I have an amazing values exercise process that you can go through, where you can connect to what's really important to you. And it's an amazing step to get to know yourself better, but also to figure out where do you fit in an organization and which jobs you need to take, which roles should you take, like all these things, so that you're more congruent in the choices that you make every day in life.
Oh, thanks so much there, Salome. And I thoroughly enjoyed your session, especially the concept of authenticity is so important, to be true to yourself. You know, thanks so much there.
Thank you, Usha. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and I'll stop my voice now. Thank you.
And again, thank you to you, Salome, for this very inspiring session. And thank you to the audience for also participating in the exercises that were along the way. It's now close to 5:30 Indian time and 1 o'clock here in Denmark. Our next speaker is going to be Vikas Malik, but before we have that session, we have room for a 5-minute break. We meet again at 1 o'clock. We will start with a short exercise, and then Vikas will come and join us. Thank you.